Ladies, gentlemen, and others, welcome back to Take Me Out to the podcast. We've got a great show for you today featuring the latest MLB news, and be sure to stick around for an exclusive interview with Bailey from Foolish Baseball. I'm your host, Johnny Jackson, and today I am joined by Jason Hamby. Jason, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. So yesterday was Roberto Clemente Day across Major League Baseball, with all Puerto Rican MLB players allowed to wear the number 21 on their jerseys, along with all players, coaches, and staff of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Clemente passed away on New Year's Eve in 1972 in a plane crash on his way to Nicaragua to give humanitarian aid after a devastating earthquake. Jason, how do you remember Roberto Clemente, especially as he died decades before either of us were born?
Right. All I've heard about Clemente was just how much he cared for his community, how much he wanted baseball to be so impactful in the Puerto Rican community, especially. I've always heard that, in his off seasons, whenever he could, he was always giving out just free baseball camps, free lessons to kids in Puerto Rico and across Central America. And is just one of the most influential baseball players and athletes to the Puerto Rican community, period. So that's how I remember Roberto Clemente.
Yeah, he finished his career with exactly 3,000 hits. You always hear about the cannon of the arm, and there's some video of him, but there's not a whole lot. And I think it's kind of a shame that we miss out on guys
Right.
like him and guys like Jackie Robinson
Right.
and Larry Doby, just even like Babe Ruth, just those behemoths of the game that we never got to see. I mean, what do you think it's like for even some of the Major League Baseball players never actually seeing him in a game?
I would guess that they're just going off of stuff like books and stuff that they've heard from other – I'm sure there's still guys in the Pirates organization who are just passing down just their stories of their just however they were in contact with Roberto Clemente and just their stories of how he impacted their lives.
Do you think that number 21 should be retired league-wide like 42 is?
I wouldn't see why it wouldn't be. I mean, Roberto Clemente has just as much impact as Jackie Robinson did, just for a different group of people.
I agree wholeheartedly. And more sad news is over the last 2 weeks, Mets legend Tom Seaver and Cardinals legend Lou Brock both passed away. Tom Seaver, known as Tom Terrific by baseball fans and Mets fans, pitched the majority of his Hall of Fame career with the Mets, including carrying the Miracle Mets of 1969 from last place in their division to a World Series championship. In remembrance of Tom Seaver, all of the Mets players rubbed dirt on their right knees, a tribute to Seaver's long pitching stride where his right knee often touched the ground. How important was that game to those Mets? I mean, Pete Alonso hit that absolutely insane walk-off homer. I mean, how did that make you feel? Like, how is that energy kind of impact you?
I just feel like it's, the Mets, like a lot of other years, have just been a very big disappointment. And I mean, all the way back to Seaver's years, they were had just become a franchise 5 or 6 years in the making, or just a total laughing stock, just a big disappointment. And here comes this young kid who, throws hard, was one of the hardest throwers in the league immediately, and took them from last place, and nobody had any hopes for them to a World Series. And I feel like it's just another thing with the Mets where they're just looking for those guys to grab onto because their team as a whole has just been disappointing.
Yeah, and it's really hard for one guy to carry a pitching staff like that. I mean, Jacob deGrom's doing his best, but I mean, he every year, he goes out with like a 1.8 ERA and goes like 3-5, for the record. It's just, it's like, what else do you want the guy to do? He gives up one run.
Exactly.
He's already in line for the loss.
If he doesn't hit a home run, he's not getting a decision.
He can't even hit anymore. He can't even help himself out. And Lou Brock, he trails only Ricky Henderson in career stolen bases. He's got 938. And his infectious smile inspired his teammates even more than his bat and his speed did. And you saw that in 1964, after being traded from the Cubs to the Cardinals in June of that year, Brock took off over those last 103 games and led the Cardinals to a World Series win. And we saw his reach even extend to the NBA, with Boston Celtics forward Jason Tatum, who's from St. Louis, wore powder blue and red shoes with R.I.P. Lou Brock for his Game 5 win over the Toronto Raptors on Monday. How big are these players' legacies and what they're leaving behind in both New York and St. Louis?
I think it's huge. I think take away Ricky Henderson, and this was kind of like this was the guy for especially the non-big like home run guys. Like this was their guy to hang on to. All the kids who were had speed but had no power, they wanted to watch Lou Brock because that was the game that they liked to play. 138 stolen bases in 1 year, and now we're lucky to get a guy with 40. Like the 40-40 club that like for Acuna last year, that was huge. Anybody with over 40 is just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. But 138 in one season, like it's these scrappy players like Lou Brock that really give a lot of kids inspiration that they too can make it.
And one of the, I guess, more troubling pieces of information that was revisited later, Lou Brock was traded from the Cubs because they already had 5 black baseball players. He was traded for a nobody. How disappointing is that to see, like as a Cubs fan and just as a baseball fan in general? And how important is it that today it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, as long as you can play, you can really have a very large impact on your team and win a World Series.
I think it serves them right. I mean, obviously they had no, like you said, they had no reason for trading him. They had 5 black players on the team. I think it serves him right that as soon as he left, he took off, and he became the Hall of Fame player that he was. Like, I'm glad that he didn't have that legacy for the Cubs, knowing that they traded him because the color of his skin is just ridiculous. And like you said, yeah, I mean, who cares what color you are? If you can play the game, then you deserve to be on the team. So
it's a shame. It really is a shame to see just how messed up even the fans were sending the owners and the GM death threats. I'm happy it's better. It's not all the way there, but it's definitely better.
Mm-hmm.
And moving into a little lighter news, Josh Hader set an MLB record with 12 consecutive appearances without giving up a hit. Is he the best reliever in baseball? And do you see him staying in Milwaukee for the entirety until free agency?
I think he has to be the best reliever in baseball. Some of me wants to say that Brad Hand is right there with him, but like you said, 12 consecutive appearances without allowing a hit is it's unreal. When this guy comes in the game, it's almost a lock. Like you got the lead after the 8th inning, you're going home with the W with this guy on the mound. I don't think I see him in as a Brewer next year. I just don't think they're in a place to compete and spend the money when they don't have the pieces around him to compete for a playoff spot. And I think there are a lot of teams who are going to want to give him a large sum of money, and I just don't think the Brewers are going to be able to match that. So I don't see him being a Brewer next year, but I do see him as the best closer in baseball, and that will come with a very hefty price tag.
So we saw some rumors about Hader to the Dodgers and maybe Hader to the Yankees. Do you think it's one of those teams, or do you think it's a team out of nowhere that maybe people aren't thinking of?
I mean, obviously, when we comes to big free agent signings, those guys have to be at the top of the list just because they have the most capital, and history-wise, they've always been the biggest go-getters in free agency. But I do like the team that I think might have the best shot in them is the Cubs, because we saw Kimbrel has just been horrible this year.
Such a disappointment.
He has. I don't know if he has a save yet. I might be wrong, but I don't know if he has one. Every time he's come in the game, they've just blown the lead. And I think Jeffers has been good for the time being. I don't think that'll be the Cubs guy going forward as like in the next coming years. So I think we could see Hader staying in that division and going with the Cubs.
Yeah, and another really bright young pitcher. Going into Wednesday's games, the Cleveland Indians and the Chicago White Sox are tied for first place in the AL Central, a terrible division, largely due to both teams' excellent starting pitching so far. Triston McKenzie was called up in large part to replace Mike Clevinger and or Zach Plesac after their incident. McKenzie so far is 2-0 through 21 innings over 4 starts, 26 strikeouts to 5 walks, and a 2.57 ERA. How has he been able to fill the shoes of Mike Clevinger, and how can the Cleveland Indians keep seemingly picking up 5-year-olds off the street, throwing them in a big league game, and they're going to go 7-shutty? What is going on?
I mean, when you have Shane Bieber on your team and you have you're able to pick his brain. I mean, and you have that amount of talent that Triston McKenzie does. Sky's the limit. The biggest problem with him is his durability. He didn't pitch at all in 2019. Didn't pitch at all. And historically in the MLB, those guys have had a lot of durability issues. I know before or in the last couple of weeks, they're capping him at 90 pitches per outing. But it's really been shocking what the Indians have been able to do. You know, when they traded Clevinger, they haven't skipped a beat with him gone. They've been almost better off without him. And he's an all-star. So it's just been incredible what the Indians rotation just been able to do night in, night out. Kept them in so many baseball games. And like you said, they're the reason they're top of the division right now.
Yeah. And we saw it even a year ago. They gave away Bauer after an all-star season.
Yep.
Over this offseason, they gave away Kluber.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame that he's hurt, but gave away Kluber, and this year they gave away Clevinger. I don't know. When does it end? How many more kids can they possibly call up? Even James Karinchak, how many kids can they possibly call up before it all comes crumbling down?
I don't know if there's a way to gauge that. I think they're just holding out hope that these guys just continue to repeat what they've been able to do every five stays. You look at all of these guys, and their stuff just speaks for themselves. Obviously, Bieber, but Carrasco is just a staple. Savall has just been Mr. Consistent right there in the middle of the rotation. And McKenzie, his stuff is he might have stuff right there with Bieber. His plus fastball, 95, 99, power curveball. It's a traditional curveball, swing and miss guy. And I just think the Indians are holding out hope that these guys can ride that wave all the way throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, they're in for a tough challenge against the White Sox. The guy they gave away, Mike Clevinger, he's been all right for San Diego so far. Kind of some weird stuff. He gives up 4 in 5 innings, gets the win, and then he gives up 2 in 6 innings and gets a loss. Yeah, that's baseball. But do you think that's just kind of uncharacteristic for Mike Clevinger, or do you think it's just a little bit of bad luck?
I wouldn't say it's uncharacteristic. The guy had to take 2 weeks off with the COVID incident, whatever it was. So I just think that it was a matter of, maybe knocking the rust off. I do think we'll see Clevinger back to form very soon. I'm not going to say it's going to be next start, but I am predicting that Clevinger will be right back to form very soon, and he's going to be the ace that leads the Padres in the playoffs.
Speaking of aces that are hopefully going to lead teams into the playoffs, Clayton Kershaw is on a revenge tour after a down year with a 3.03 ERA over 178 innings in 2019. He went to driveline over the offseason, came back throwing over a mile an hour harder, increasing the strikeouts, lowering the walks. Going into Wednesday's game, he's carrying a 1.5 ERA over 36 innings in 6 starts. Will Clayton Kershaw keep going on this run, and do you think this is the year he finally gets over the hump in the playoffs?
I do, and here's why. Well, first of all, we're talking about him having a down year with a 3 ERA. Let's just put that in perspective real quick. That's a really good earned
all-star,
runs average.
Literally an all-star campaign.
All-star. And it's unbelievable how consistent he has that we're even talking about a 3 ERA being a down year. Now, that being said, throwing harder than he has since 2017, average fastball at 91.5. That's why he was getting in trouble last year. That fastball kept dipping down as he would line up 2 and 3 times over. They'd be able to catch up a lot better. And what I've seen from Kershaw this year, I haven't seen ever in previous years. He's throwing this 88, 89 mile an hour slide piece that I've never seen him throw. It's always been the big 12-6 curveball that's been nasty. We see it on Instagram all the time where that's been his staple pitch. That's been his big pitch that's made his career. But now he's throwing this hard slider, almost a cutter, like a 7-inch break in between. That's really throwing guys off because they haven't seen it before. And it's just another compliment to the fastball and to the curveball. And that addition is why I think he's going to get over this hump. That and the conspiracy with the sign stealing, you could argue of that last playoffs. But I think Kershaw's going to get it done this year. I really do.
Yeah, one of the most, frustrating to me because I grew up playing baseball and I was a pitcher. So Clayton Kershaw, it was like 2009 ish, 2010, right when he first got called up. The Dodgers were like, hey, you've got a fastball and you've got a disgusting curveball. That's it. You know, you've got people just aren't swinging at the curveball and they're teeing up on your fastball. And so he's like, I guess I'll try a slider. And then he throws a slider, and it's like one of the best sliders in baseball. And
Right.
he's kept throwing it harder, and it keeps getting better. And you're seeing it this year. You said it's taken on another life. It's even nastier than it's ever been. He's throwing it more than he ever has. He's
Yep.
almost like 60% breaking balls. Doesn't even
Right.
have a changeup, and he's still mowing guys down. I mean,
Mhm.
I love it because Kersh is my favorite player of all time. I mean, what
No,
is it like? What is it like for a guy who's not a Dodgers fan watching that type of performance day in and day out from one of the greatest to ever do it?
I mean, as a pitcher myself, I think it's a phenomenal example of reinventing yourself. This guy, you know, he's obviously heard and the people chirping at him about his playoff performances, and he, like I said, he reinvented himself. He came out with a harder slider, and he's taking care of himself, and his fastball is harder, like we talked about. And the guy's just a consummate pro. I mean, he's the best pitcher of this generation. I don't think there's too much doubt about that, just because of how consistent he's been over the last decade. And he's the Mike Trout of pitchers. I mean, that's just it. He's been the equivalent of Trout, but for more years as of right now, because he's older, obviously. But I really appreciate how he goes about pitching and how good he is. Obviously, I never look forward to facing him in the playoffs as a Braves fan. Luckily, he hasn't shut us down too bad. But I'm certainly not looking forward to facing him maybe this playoffs because, like I said, this could be the year where he silences all critics. I don't know about the Dodgers as a whole because we talked about last week, other pitchers in the rotation are big question marks. But as far as just Kershaw alone goes, I think he's going to have a big playoffs.
All right, Jason, thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure to stay tuned because after the break, we have our exclusive interview with Bailey from Foolish Baseball.
I have a very special guest, Mr. Mike Golic Jr. Let me tell you, this is one of the nicest guys I have met so far in this industry. So thank you so much for coming and talking with me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, listen, smart move. I am not immune to flattery, so buttering me up on the way in is the absolute right way to do this. You're learning already.
That was the goal. I had it in my notes.
Ladies, gentlemen, and others, welcome to Take Me Out to the Podcast presented by HDFN. I am your host, Johnny Jackson, and today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Bailey from Foolish Baseball. His channel's flagship series, Baseball Bits, brings together analytical deep dives and his humor, packaged in a video game aesthetic. How are you doing today, Bailey?
You know, just hanging in there. Happy to have baseball on at least. That's something new over the past few weeks, and just interested to see how my channel grows with that in place now.
Yeah. Bailey's last video on his channel featured the nastiest pitch in baseball, Tyler Glasnow's devastating curveball. And I think just a couple hours after that video was posted, Tyler Glasnow gave up an extra base hit on that curveball to Gio Urshela.
That is correct.
Do you believe in jinxes?
Lately I do, because in an episode right before that, I said that I thought Christian Yelich had the best chance of hitting 400 as well. So that's not going great either.
He's picking it up. He hit a homer last night. I mean, hope that could still happen. I mean, there's 40 more games left.
Yeah, I'm rooting for him. And at least I said there's another one where I said Harper's underrated, and he's off to a really hot start. So I'm not wrong all the time, just most of the time.
Yeah. And so in your earlier Baseball Bits videos, you used music from a lot of early Nintendo and Sega games and a few PS1 and PS2 games. However, in your more recent videos, you've leaned more towards independent music creators, specifically William Cage and Maxo. Is there a particular reason for that?
Yeah, I was just getting too it was becoming a full-time job, and I was worried about sort of this gray area copyright wise. So I just moved on to these independent composers that you speak of, and it's been fun working with them. It's good because I can also support their work, and you know, I buy all their music. I support them via Patreon, and hopefully what I do also gives them exposure. And so it's been kind of like a win-win for both. No one needs to know. Everyone knows Mario, you know, but maybe people should know William Cage and Maxo.
And how did you hear about them?
It was just Google. I'm an avid user of the website Bandcamp as well. So I think I was searching on Bandcamp to try to find people who fit what I was trying to do, and they definitely fit. I think most people haven't even really quite picked up on the fact that there was like a change in the soundtrack to that degree.
Awesome. And so you obviously had a profile in The Athletic, written by Stephen J. Nesbitt. But also in The Athletic, your video on the 2011 draft was based on Dan Connolly's article. Was that article given to you, or did you have a choice of maybe a few articles? How was that specific topic chosen?
Yeah, at time I had a deal in place with The Athletic where one of the videos I did would be based on an article, but they gave me the creative freedom to choose the article. And, there's a lot, if you compare my video to the article, there's a lot of kind of input I had in there. So they're very flexible to work with in that regard.
So that wasn't really restricting on you at all?
No, I didn't find it to be too restricted creatively.
In the profile on you, Nesbitt mentioned that you went to a lot of open mic nights earlier. Do you think that kind of helped you refine your writing and maybe refine your humor that you use in baseball bits?
Yeah, I think so to some degree. And I think another thing is that with baseball bits and Foolish Baseball becoming a thing, like that itch is gone, like to do the open mic nights. It's like now I have a way bigger platform than I ever did in a club with like 20 other people who are just waiting to have their 5 minutes as well. So it kind of works both ways.
And what's been the most difficult video for you to make in terms of baseball bits?
That's a great question. The most difficult one, I think probably just in terms of ambition, probably the one I made about Pedro Martinez, the 2 seasons he had in 1999 and 2000. That video ended up being like 23 or 24 minutes long. And so at that point, it's like I'm basically making a mini documentary or something. And I'm really proud of how it turned out. But I remember finishing it and being like, I never want to make a video that long again.
How has a failure or apparent failure set you up for a future success? And do you maybe have a favorite failure of yours?
Favorite failure? Well, I mean, there's many. But I think there was a time in my life where I was living in Germany. I'd lived in Germany for a year. You might have read that in the article, actually. And I remember coming back from Germany and having the goal in mind to like work in baseball, but really being completely resigned that there's no way I could possibly make it happen. I just didn't have, the technical coding know-how to be like a numbers cruncher in a front office. I didn't really have like any connections in the industry to speak of. And so I just felt like completely dejected. And, I had this YouTube channel that had 800 subscribers. And the first time I made a baseball bits, which is, like you said, the flagship series, I probably got like 200 views or something like that. But then I kept making them. And I think by the time I got to the third one, it just blew up. And then that's kind of where I got to where I am now. But so I don't think, my journey is a very lucky one. I faced, some degree of adversity, but in many ways I got very lucky. The YouTube algorithm can expose your work to a lot of people really quickly. And that's both a blessing and a curse. We kind of live and die by it. But I got lucky, and then that's what kind of set me up for future successes.
What's one of the best or most worthwhile investments that you've ever made? It could be in terms of time, money, energy, anything. Yeah,
I mean, I think definitely as far as just when I was starting to take the YouTube channel with a little bit of seriousness, I bought a microphone for $30 on Amazon. And I thought that made a huge quality difference for sure. As far as just time, I would say any amount of time I spent reading a book about baseball has been really helpful in terms of me formulating ideas. And I think that reading in general is just a really good use of one's time. And it doesn't really, I think, even matter what you read. It doesn't have to be like a really challenging novel. If your thing is like really trashy, like romance books, I think that's way better than not reading at all.
So what are the maybe 2 or 3 books that have been most important for you in growing as a person and a content creator?
Yeah, well, so I'll say Moneyball. That was probably the first baseball book I read that kind of got me thinking along these sabermetric lines. I read that when I was like 12 or 13, so pretty formative age. And then more recently, I would say, that's a good question. I would say another good baseball book I'm working on right now is called Future Value. It's by Eric Longenhagen and Kylie McDaniel. Moneyball's by Michael Lewis, by the way, but I think a lot of people don't need me to tell them that. but yeah, and that's a book about scouting in baseball. But yeah, and then but yeah, and I read a lot of I read a lot of political philosophy as well. That's kind of or history books as well. So Conquest of Bread, check it out. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. Since you've started the Baseball Bits series, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life and maybe your quality of life?
I think the amount of responsibility I have to have for myself to make this work is what's challenged me and also probably made me a better person. The way I see it, like if you work a regular 9-to-5 job, you can go into the office and just kind of have a lazy day. It happens to people. You go in, maybe you're chatting it up with your desk mate too much or something like that. Maybe you think to yourself, oh, I'll just take a long lunch today. And you can get through the day without having accomplished too much. And I don't blame people who do that, by the way. I'm just saying you can have good days and bad days. But with what I do, if I don't do anything, the work doesn't get done. And there's really just no way around that. So I have to be, when I'm working, I have to really set my mind to it, because oftentimes I do have deadlines to meet, whether it's personal deadlines I set for myself or it's deadlines that I have to meet in terms of like sponsors. So I think just having that level of responsibility in my job has challenged me in a way, because I'm not naturally like this, person who's really good at concentrating for a long time. I definitely have like some ADD, ADHD tendencies. I think we all kind of do, but that's what's really helped me grow as a person, is that challenge to really look at what I do and say, hey, if I don't buckle up right now, like just the work doesn't get done, and there's no one I can blame besides myself. Would
you say that that's the biggest challenge or hardest part of continually making this content?
I think so. Yeah. I think there's an element of responsibility there that's not really present if you do a lot of work in, say, a team setting or or if just, people go to work for 8 hours a day, but they don't work for 8 hours a day is how I would put it. Whereas for me, maybe I might only work 5 or 6 hours a day, but when I'm doing that, I'm working,
Do you maybe have a separate space versus like where you like live and hang out versus where you work, to kind of split those in your mind?
Yeah, I would like that someday, but currently no. I mean, I'm sitting in my bedroom right now. I'm looking at the same computer screen that I use to make a baseball, but it's the same screen I might use to play a video game later. So that there's that demarcation between work and pleasure is tough, and sometimes I can find myself switching between the two pretty nonchalantly throughout the day. So I try to really, to deal with that. I really have to be like, okay, so from this block of time, I'm work Bailey. This is all for foolish baseball, and then once I hit this certain time of the day, take a little break.
So how have you, I guess, improved creating that balance in your life?
I think moving out was really key. I moved out of my parents' place about a year ago now, and that's kind of given me 100% my own space to do that kind of stuff. Before that, I remember whenever I wanted to record a video, like the voiceover, in order to find the right setting for that, I had to take my laptop out and record it literally in the back of my hatchback in my parents' garage, because just with the soundproofing that's in a car, that was literally the best place to get the audio. And now I don't have to do silly stuff like that quite as much anymore. But yeah, moving out of my parents' place definitely helped out. And that's probably number one for me, to be honest.
All right. Thank you so much for talking to me, Bailey. Just to close it out, if there was any one person in the entire world, alive or dead, that you could sit down and talk to for 30 or 40 minutes, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not a overly religious or spiritual person, but I would just have to say Jesus. I think, so much of what we see in the world today is shaped by the life of Jesus, and whether, you think he's the savior or not, that's up to you. That's fine. But purely as a historical person, he definitely existed. And I think it'd be interesting to talk to him.
Awesome. Bailey, thank you so much for talking to me today. And that's basically it.